Well, good evening, one and all. Welcome to Budget Day with Chewy and Pat and Big Hairy News. Hello. Got your swag bag going, your swag hat on?
Got my swag here, because I assume, like, this is the first time I've paid attention to the budget. I assume that this is where Grant Robertson goes door to door giving us all cash.
Yeah, because it's a budget
I'm just waiting. I guess he's late.
Well, is he to your place first or my place first?
I don't know. You're further to the north, so maybe it'll be your place first.
All right, and then down to your place.
Okay.
So you might see him at midnight. I might see him at 11 o'clock.
That's like Santa.
With that little brown envelope full of cash to waste. Is that right?
Judging by some of the comments that I've been reading today, yes.
Very good. Well, we've got a lot to talk about today. Quite excited, actually, to have Shamubeel Eaqub coming in to saying g'day to us. Talk, obviously, a bit about the budget, but also some other bits and bobs as well. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll have already seen a little clip, but I talked to him about the economy. I say, compared to the rest of the world, how are we going? I ask him about how the economy, this is the thing that I found most interesting. Imagine that, because inflation, right? And some of the financial situations hitting the world right now, it's without question that it's because the government did stuff with money around COVID. The right like to say printed money, but what that means is they had more money to do things like keep small business open and allow people to stay at home when they had COVID, right? The right are now saying about all these inflationary issues and pointing back to this government of wasteful money. The wasteful money they're talking about is helping small businesses stay open. That's the wasteful money by, yes, borrowing to keep them open. So one of my questions tonight to Shamubeel is, what do you think the economy would have looked like if we had have done the opposite? If we had have done what all the opposition is suggesting we should have done, right? Because they're criticizing the inflation, which is tied directly into the money that was spent around COVID. If we had have followed what they're saying today, back then, what would the economy look like today? And it's a really interesting little part of the conversation. So that's going to come up, and also towards the end of the show, we'll have a bit of a chat about Mr. Musk. Mr. Musk went on a business channel to talk business with a business person, a pretty softball interview. And it appears
he just kept it to business, didn't he?
Well, even in a softball interview, they just, I don't know, he gets one pushback and he falls over. So it's a really, I've got 3 clips to play for you. One where he basically defends a white supremacist. One where he glitches for 12 seconds, which unfortunately for him will be the meme of Twitter of 2023. And another one where he claims free speech is the most important thing, no matter what it costs him, not realizing that Tesla is a public entity, which means if he does things to affect it, it can actually be criminal. Like you are legally forced to make money for investors. You can't just go, fuck them, if we lose money, it doesn't matter. It does matter when you've got a public entity. There's actually some really tight rules around that and around making money. But he basically says at one point, if we lose money, big deal. I don't care. I just say what I want, even if it means we lose money. I'm like, fucking hell. So we'll get onto that before the end of the show as well. I want to say a hello and a congratulations to all our patrons for joining us. I got to tell you, we are, I know this sounds a bit sad actually, now I'm going to say this out loud, but before Christmas we talked about making it to 50 patrons. We're at 49. So we're at 49 patrons as we speak today, because we had another patron join us. Can you see there, bottom right-hand corner? Mayor Jeremy Miller. Mayor Jeremy Miller has become a patron. I don't know where Jeremy is the mayor of, or if indeed he's just chosen the moniker for himself, mayor. We don't care.
Why not?
Call yourself what you want. We've got in here, look, just a Rowena, and we've got a JN, and we've got a DIY guru, a KJS, an AJ, a Lady Power. So our you can use whatever name you want on there. And Mayor Jeremy Miller is now a patron who joined up today. I want to say thank you to him and to all our patrons. And if you want to be a part of what we're doing, maybe you could be the 50th. If you want to be the 50th, then head along to patreon.com/Big Hairy News to support what we do financially. That is lovely, and that is all. So, you got any pithy tangents you want to go to, Chewy, before we get into the serious side of budget 2023?
No, let's look at the money bucket.
Let's look at the money bouquet, and let's start with basically just a bit of a wrap from look, on some level it's interesting hearing Jenna Lynch talking about the budget. Remember, she's married to an ACT Party member, Chief of Staff. Someone said something in one of our chats through the night, through the last week or so, is we would like to track down some critical analysis from Jenna Lynch of the ACT Party. It's quite hard to find. If at all. But there is obviously a bias with this, and there is obviously angles in this. And you think you can hear it when they decide what they've tried to give the budget a name, and the name is, well, I'll leave it up to you to guess. Is it going to be a positive name, or is it going to be a negative name? We shall see. And also, we're going to have a look at this, and then also Shamubeel Eaqub has joined me this afternoon. We'll play that straight after this and then get into the Musk conversation. So let's start with a bit of a wrap up of what happened in Budget 2023 and what some of the big actual decisions were.
Tēnā tātou katoa, good
Tēnā
evening. Young
koutou
families
katoa.
are the winners in this year's budget. The 20 hours free early childhood education policy has been extended to include children from 2 years old. It'll cost $1.2 billion. The government will also make KiwiSaver contributions to those on paid parental leave.
Sorry to pause, but I think I read on an article today that was about $138 a week. So for people, and look, obviously it's a small slice of the population because you have to have a 2-year-old, but for those people, $125 to $150 a week, this is worth. So it's a lovely little bonus for young parents for sure.
Meaning parents won't fall as far behind while they take time off to have a family. Public transport will become free for under 13-year-olds, and it'll be half price for under 25s. And to ease health costs, the government is scrapping the $5 charge on prescriptions. The Finance Minister says the budget aims to ease the cost of living without exacerbating inflation. Treasury says New Zealand will avoid a recession, with modest growth now anticipated this year. Our coverage will...
I think that's one of the biggest news stories of the day, actually, that for so long we've been told about this recession that's coming, this 10% inflation that's coming, this recession, this is terrible. You know, we've had conversations with people on here who almost made me a wager that the recession was on the way, and we haven't had it yet. And I think I heard the Finance Minister this afternoon, I don't think it's in this clip, talking about being a bit careful, because, I mean, if he was to say, well, of course there's no recession and then there was one, he would look foolish. But he's basically said Treasury has forecast no recession, and if there is one, it will be a shallow one. So compared to the rest of the world, again, I think no recession for New Zealand is actually perhaps one of the biggest news stories of the day, Chewy.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting. I think one thing I would have liked to see is public transport free for everyone. But I mean, that was going to be a long bow to draw. I think that's going to make a big difference to people. And yeah, prescriptions. That was one I didn't expect, but the more that I think about it, the more I like it.
Yeah.
When you think about the people who are going to benefit for that in the situations that they're in, you're looking at older people, you're looking at families taking their kids to the doctors and that sort of thing, and just basically being sick and being off work and having to find money and stuff like that for things like prescriptions. That's got to be good. Anything that takes a sting out of, paying to go see a doctor.
Again, I saw something.
Right?
I saw something today, and I can't give you the exact number, sorry, but it was 100 and something thousand, like 135,000 people last year didn't pick up their prescriptions because they couldn't afford the $5. So it's a pretty massive
crazy,
number.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Although I got to say this as well. I don't know if it's like this everywhere in the country, but here in Dunedin, if you go to, I don't know if you know this, Chewy, but if you don't, it doesn't matter now. But if you go to Countdown in the One Ways and get your prescriptions from there, it costs nothing. I don't know how they do it or why they do it, but the Countdown and the One Ways, they've got a pharmacy inside it. You don't pay anything for prescriptions there today. So I don't know whether they do that to get people, I don't know whether the supermarket subsidises that just to get people through the door, because obviously if you're going to go there to get your prescription, you might pick up some milk and some eggs and stuff while you're there. But that's what they already do. So
yeah. I mean, just to highlight something in the chat here, Peter's just mentioned this. It puts it at the big chemist warehouses as well. Now, I probably would want to dig into that a little bit deeper, but yeah, on the initial pass, yes, those big overseas, bargain chemists and chemist warehouse, that sort of thing, that was one of their big advertising pushes, that you don't have to pay to get prescriptions through there.
right.
And it's really put the smaller local pharmacies under the gun, because that's money coming in the door for them. So that takes away the big hit from these big overseas chemists.
So as Peter says in another message he's got there, it's a loss leader. So in other words, a loss leader for people who don't know is when, for example, you go into a supermarket and they sell a particular product technically at a loss. So whilst you're there, you'll spend another $100 on other stuff. You'll go in to pick up the loss leader and spend other things. That's what I was wondering. Hey, let's now go into the Jenna Lynch narrative of this and let her explain to us a bit more about what happened today from her perspective. I won't go any further than that.
We'll look at all the winners and losers. First up, our political editor, Jenna Lynch. And Jenna, what are you calling this year's budget?
The government sold this as a bread and butter budget, but with very little for a lot of the country. We're calling this the breadcrumbs budget.
Did you get that?
God, she very nearly didn't.
No, she's calling it the breadcrumbs. That's what she's
that's
calling
what
it.
I mean.
She's calling it the breadcrumbs budget. Should we just double check that?
The breadcrumbs budget.
Yeah. So this is the breadcrumbs budget. I'm not entirely sure where that comes from. Well, it's a bit of a strange thought to think about where the bread comes from, but this is now officially the breadcrumbs budget.
Bread and butter budget, but with very little for a lot of the country. We're calling this the breadcrumbs budget.
Little Natia is days away from her first birthday.
She's got about 5 teeth now.
A special moment in what's been a special year. But aside from the joy that parenthood brings, life's been a bit tough for the Rule family, with everything going up in price, food, the mortgage on their South Auckland home, everything you need to raise a bub. It's hard to get by.
Very hard, yeah. I'm currently working 60 to 70 hours a week. Sometimes I don't see my baby here for 2 or 3 days, and that because she's asleep when I go to work and she's asleep when I come home.
Today, tuning in to see a reprieve. Their childcare costs are about to plummet. From next year, they'll get 20 free ECE hours a week for Latia to go to daycare. The government's extending it to 2-year-olds.
Free childcare would be worth a hell of a lot for me.
Emma Reichenbach owns Little Settlers in Bombay.
Amazing, wonderful initiative, fantastic. It's about time our 2-year-olds were seen as important.
She knows how much that's going to mean to the parents whose children come here.
It will see reduced fees for families, which is amazing right now, as we all need some more money in the back pocket because of the cost of living. So awesome, love it.
Parents are thrilled.
Well, I have a 16-month-old, so it will help me in the future, yeah.
Last year it was a bit of a struggle. I mean, this little guy's gotten a little bit bigger now, so he's not qualifying for that anymore, but would have been helpful.
Once the kids are off to school, free buses and trains until the age of 13. Then it's half price until they turn 25. A cost of living and climate change policy in one.
Each of the main cost of living initiatives have other benefits, a twofer, if you will.
The final crumb of the cost of living cake, free prescriptions, the $5 charge.
Hang on, she called it the
for
final.
some people, wouldn't it?
I messed that up. She called it the final crumb there. Doesn't she mean the final cum? I'm confused. Isn't it the final cum? I don't know. She called it the final crumb. I'm not sure why. Why would you call it a crumb if it's the breadcrumbs budget?
Probably a typo on her script.
Right. Fair.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, very good.
It's a huge deal, especially at the moment with the cost of living crisis. It just removes a barrier to healthcare for everyday New Zealanders.
But for those without health needs, without 2-year-olds.
Yeah, all those people who never need to go to a doctor ever. All of those people who never need a prescription. Like, you know, that 90% of the population, all those people who don't ever get sick. Those people, fuck you guys.
What is there here?
Well, and here is the fact that the cost of your healthcare are coming down. And here is the fact that the cost of transportation is coming down. And here is the fact that we're investing heavily in this in all of the community services that are around you.
His bread and butter budget serving up a lot for the littlies, but not much for the middle.
There you go. Here's the first report, Chewy. Happy ending budget. You guys aren't allowed to be funnier than us. This is the rules.
Okay,
so
I'm going to text something here, right? Because she's directly speaking to me, right? A childless person that doesn't get sick very often, and there's nothing in this budget for me, so I should be furious.
Yeah,
I should be furious, right?
And look how much money you've got with that hat you're wearing. Yeah, there's
exactly
flashing your cash.
People that had to pay for children and childcare and feeding them, they can't buy hats like this.
No.
I got disposable income, son. No, look, I really do not like this trying to pitch people's lifestyles off against each other in a budget. There has never, ever been a budget where there is something for everyone.
No.
You know, it is quite rightly aimed, and I loved how they laid that out, that you could actually see the flow-on effects. They are aiming it at children to give them a really good start. They're aiming it at young families where maybe not both parents are working. You know, you're trying to take the strain off to let parents raise their children so they're not off ram raiding. Isn't that the end game? Isn't that all we need to worry about? Because if the kids get into a bloody Honda Aqua or something, God knows, Noel Leemings is in trouble. But yeah, like they said that this was going to be a tight budget, but they've still managed to target some activity at people that need it. Yeah. I don't need it.
And this is a really important point, I think. There was a tweet by Rachel Smalley, former Today FM announcer. I don't know what she's doing now, journalist though. Isn't this what the community services card was designed for? Middle class and wealthy New Zealanders don't need the taxpayer to fund their $5 antibiotics prescription. This is madness. 619 million would have smashed a large chunk of the cancer drugs on Pharmac waiting list. Here's the thing, right? First of all, as Chewy has kind of said, you know, the people who are using these most of all, prescriptions in general, are vulnerable, sick, and elderly people. So they're not the people that Rachel Smalley is talking about. However, if you did follow that logic that Rachel Smalley is talking about, the user pays, those can afford it should pay for it, then you could say the same about the 2-year-old getting free childcare. Because there are many people who are wealthy enough and comfortable enough to have their 2-year-olds playing childcare. Why are we talking about the $5 prescription being a bad thing if people can afford it, but we're not talking about the childcare for 2-year-olds? No one's saying, oh, but if you can afford childcare, why shouldn't you pay for it? But they are saying, oh, if you can afford prescriptions, you should pay for it. Now, that's because it's only $5 and it doesn't feel like a lot. And we all are putting value, these people, these commentators are putting value in the childcare, but they're not putting the same value in people getting a $5 prescription because they think, well, fuck, it's only $5. It's only a couple of gold coins. It's not like childcare. They say it is different. But for some people, that $5 prescription fee being waived will be far more valuable to them than another family sending their 2-year-old to daycare and having it paid for. So it annoys me that people are kind of picking on one of these things, saying the wealthy can pay for this, why don't we let them? But then they're ignoring all the other things that the wealthy could also pay for. You can't have it both ways. Either let's make it all user play based on your income, or like this, just a broad spectrum, one shot for all, one breadcrumb for all, that it helps everybody, whether you can afford it or not.
Yeah, I think they've looked at what little they can spread around, and I think they've done a pretty reasonable job about it.
Yeah.
And I think what we're seeing from corners of the media now is basically just a beat up for something that we knew was coming.
Yeah.
That it was going to be a pretty bare cupboard, but they've still managed to have something there that is going to make an actual noticeable immediate difference for a lot of New Zealanders.
Yeah.
Not me. I'm furious about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to go steal a 2-year-old just so I can take some advantage. But yeah, like this pitting of people against each other, I do not like it. Don't like it at all.
Let's jump into the next part of the story, because of course we've just had a little part of the story which is like, "Oh, these people are going to go well." So of course the next thing they have to do is go, "Who's grumpy about it?" Moo. That's the next part of the news hub story.
Oh yes, yeah,
and Chewy, maybe I'll wait, but see if you can recognise a familiar face in this conversation.
Oh God, who?
A familiar face in this conversation. You see if you can pick up on it.
Well, there were a few more breadcrumbs.
Hang on. There's not an R in come.
Oh, it's another typo.
It's a fucking typo.
To go around. There are 5 million LED light bulbs, 100,000 insulation and heating fit-outs, and 7,500 water heating systems for low-income families. The gaming sector will get $160 million for a 20% rebate for developers. A circuit breaker program targeting repeat child offenders will be expanded to Hamilton, Christchurch and Auckland City. $450 million.
That's not like helping deal with crime and stuff, is it? And to help. No, it's terrible. Okay.
To building science and research hubs. There's an $825 million package for Māori to build and repair homes, more whānau order services, and great news for Te Matatini, that's secured funding too. Government Disability Support Services will get $836 million.
Privileged disabled people.
3,000 more state homes have been funded and 30,000 more apprentices will be supported. Though, as political reporter Amelia Wade explains, for Middle New Zealand, there weren't many, if any, goodies.
For most Kiwis, like Steve Christodoulou and his whānau, there weren't a lot of goodies from Grant today.
Definitely a loser. I mean, there's nothing in the budget at all that is going to affect me in any way.
Steve was really keen on a tax cut.
They call it the bread and butter budget, but to be honest with you, it's not going to help anybody with bread and butter. When they're standing at the supermarket aisle, still no money in their pockets.
Middle New Zealand.
Now,
recognise?
Do you recognise it all?
Did I recognise him?
Yeah.
No. Why should I recognise this man?
Do you remember the AM show having the average New Zealanders on?
Oh.
Do you remember the average New Zealanders on the AM show?
Okay.
That's him. The same guy.
Yeah.
And remember, a few people did a bit of a deep dive into this average New Zealander who was the CEO of a construction company.
Oh, righto. Okay.
Pretty average. He's the CEO of a construction company. And when they went through his Facebook feed and stuff, they found things like this. Fantastic news. People are starting to see through the spin when National started to go up in the polls. So News Hub's average New Zealander, Middle New Zealander, is the CEO of a construction company. We should just get rid of that one right there. CEO of a construction company. And is a National Party supporter. And if you actually want to check out more about who he is as a person,
Three mutual friends, including Bill English,
Paula Bennett. Yeah. Now you might say, Pat, why are you friends with them? Well, because I'm in the media and I'm friends with every MP. They're all, but the friends that we're mutual with are National Party people. So this is their average New Zealander, Middle New Zealander, who they've put forward. News Hub, funnily that. Talking about how there's no tax cuts for him.
So he's just had like literally a right-wing talking point. Like he might as well have been having a National Party rosette on him at that point.
There you go. So I'm just saying, you know, you are entitled to have whoever you want on News Hub, and if you are a commentator or a New Zealand citizen, you're entitled to share your thoughts. But we did this last time, and when some people delved into his background a bit, it became pretty clear pretty quickly that there were some ties, at least with the ideology of the National Party. So can you still be an average New Zealander and vote National? Of course you can. But I think if you're going to be used in a sense by media to point out the foibles of the left, you should tell people about that. That should be something out in the open pretty clearly.
If you cast your mind back when we were looking at a story about the initial cost of living crisis and that sort of thing, and they had that Wellington student, and people were going through and critiquing
bottles of wine,
critiquing what was in her fridge. Right, I'd love to see inside that man's fridge. That is like a $2,500 fridge for a start.
I'm allowed to say this because of my size. I would suggest not a lot from the looks of them, personally. Because I'm allowed to make that joke because it's not sizist. It's like, African Americans can use the N-word. I can make that kind of joke. In fact, he's the guy that I referenced as Fat Duncan Garner. Remember? I was like, fuck, Duncan Garner's put on weight.
Oh, now I do remember that. Yes. Yeah. No, like you're absolutely right. Like, why are they going back to
Fat
this
Duncan
guy?
Garner. Why?
And more to the point,
Because I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why they're going back to him. Because someone within the production has a relationship with him. We've all done this on radio and TV before. You need a guest to do something or say something. You get out your fucking phone and you pull up your contacts. That's why he would have spoken. He's been on the AM show a couple of times, always from the right, the position on the right. And now he's an average New Zealander. It's a little bit like I've done a couple of various stints on Shortland Street. I played a security guard and I played a removal person. And what actually happened, unfortunately, one day is in TVNZ used to replay like the Shortland Street in the morning and then have the new one at night. I had a sister-in-law at the time who was a massive fan of Shortland Street. She saw me in the morning show being a security guard. And on the same day, in the evening, I was, the other way around, being the repo man. And in the evening, I was the security guard on the same day because I did the replay. It's the same sort of thing. It's the same person on the same, like not on the same day, but they're just regurgitating their characters. And to put someone up as the average New Zealander, who obviously might be average in the context of life in general, but has a political bias and wants to paint a political narrative. Let me just highlight again for you, if you don't agree with me, from this gentleman. And I'm happy to show his Facebook page because he's put himself in front of the cameras. He considers Labour to be spin doctors, and he's desperately happy that National and people are voting for National back in March of 2022 are seeing through Labour's spin. That doesn't sound like the average New Zealander that would give you a pretty fair kind of response to the Labour government budget.
Hey, just a thought that springs to mind, Pat. Do we know his construction company?
I know it, yeah. I'm not going to put that out there. It doesn't matter.
No. Do you think he took a wage subsidy?
I don't know. It's a good question. We could probably find it out. I'm assuming you can search those.
Might be a little bit important if he's talking about that there's nothing in it for me. There's nothing in this bloody Labour government in it for me that maybe kept the doors on his business open.
Maybe. Right, let's keep going with the story about all the unhappy people. All three of them.
Sorry, you're a loser today.
For those middle income people, what they needed us to do was make sure that inflation started to come down. That is what this budget helps to do. Yes.
If you need to get from A to B, it's about to get more expensive. The 25-cent fuel tax is coming back and half-price public transport is ending for over 25s.
No! That's the worst. Oh, that's unfair.
Just can't keep giving away money for everything.
Stop it!
While there may have been some frills in health and education, the health and education systems themselves are losers too. The government hasn't inflation matched how much it costs to keep the lights on.
There's still a pinch point next year where inflation will be rising faster than the contributions to education, and that's a real challenge.
Does that mean cuts to those services?
No, it doesn't. Firstly, in health, the spending that we put out last year is significant and represents a very big increase. Within education, there are a variety of different funding rates.
For Kiwis needing to keep their own lights on, there's literally light bulbs, 5 million of them, and more efficient hot water systems and installation for low-income households.
What would you tell Grant Robertson if you could, now that we've seen the budget?
I would have said this is disappointing. You know, he says that he's there to help people, but as much as he's potentially tried, he really hasn't. He's dropped the ball.
Grant Robertson says there is a...
He hasn't helped people, or he hasn't helped me. My back pocket's not affected, or, you know.
I know what would help him. If someone could bring him Han Solo and the Wookiee.
I actually personally think perhaps his diabetes medicine is now going to be free at the chemist. That's going to be a help, surely.
Light for every New Zealander, and that's the one on the economic horizon with no recession. The rebuild from the cyclones and the floods has kept the economy humming. The government's also pushed out the surplus, so there'll be a $7 billion or more deficit this year and then the next. And then the government's back on track to be back in black by 2026, helped in part by a surprise new tax. The government is raising the top tax rate for trusts to 39% to match the income tax rate.
That should put an extra $350 million a year in the government coffers.
Every reason for optimism that we are coming through the worst of it and we have a solid platform to grow sustainably again.
This is the blowout budget. He came, he borrowed, he bankrupted all of us.
Over the next 4 years, the government is set to spend an extra $9.4 billion compared to what they thought back in December. At the same time, they'll be taking in $11 billion less on the revenue side. That doesn't seem to be spending with restraint.
Also not showing restraint, Christopher Luxon, with his use of his favourite slam.
Continued addiction to spending. Addicted to spending. Completely addicted to spending. It's reckless addiction to spending. Addiction to spending.
It is no wonder his own colleagues have started to refer to him as Captain Cliche.
A very chipper Captain Chippy chuffed with his first budget. Amelia Wade, News Hub.
So here's something to know as well, to make it really clear for people. We're going to head off shortly, Ash, and talk to Shamubeel Eaqub. But yes, the opposition is correct that the more borrowing is happening. But this is, let me explain to you why more borrowing is happening. More borrowing is happening. Basically, the projections have been pushed out by 12 months for one reason, and one reason is the cyclones. We've just had weather events in New Zealand, or storm events in New Zealand, that are the second most costly natural events that this country has ever seen, with the first being obviously the Christchurch earthquakes. And because of that, they aren't going to hit their targets for next year. It's going to be the year after. So 12 extra months of having to do. Imagine your house had a fire and you weren't insured. And so the projection for you paying off your mortgage had to be put back by a year because you had to find 20 or 30 or 40 grand to to fix up the wall that had just been burnt down. That's what's just happened in the economy because of what's happened with the cyclones. Money needs to be put into that for recovery, and that's put the projections back by 1 year. They're still getting to surplus just a year later. It's really important to know, Chewy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the comparison with Christchurch is apt. I mean, I kind of feel like the recovery up in that part of the country has kind of fallen by the wayside. We don't really talk about it. There's not much on the news about it, whereas Christchurch was dominant and we knew what was going on, like basically on a day-to-day basis. So I think almost the fact, they had a bit of bad weather up north, that's it.
Yeah.
We've kind of forgotten how absolutely devastating it is and how much work needs to go back into recovering that entire region.
Yep.
So for National to go, you're addicted to spending. Yeah, we probably want to put roads back into that part of the country. Yeah, mental. Absolutely mental.
Isn't it crazy, Rob, telling us that extreme climate disaster in some way might affect the budget? That can't be right. That can't be right. Of course it can't be right. I mean, why would a massive thing like these cyclones or say COVID or say under national, the Christchurch quakes. Imagine if people went after the Christchurch quakes. Wow, what a blowout. This car, why is it costing us more money? It's not.
I don't even like Christchurch, Pat.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to hear from Shamubeel Eaqub. I caught up with him about 5 o'clock this afternoon. Really about the budget, but we go into a few other areas to do with the economy and stuff as well, because as you all know, I love being the dumbest person in the room. So I go, can you please explain numbers to me on some level? And he does. It's kind of nice, actually. The chat will still be going. Feel free to go away in there and have some fun, and we will come back to you in about a quarter of an hour. It's a bit less than that, actually. It's close to a quarter of an hour after this conversation with Shamubeel, and we'll wrap up to talk about Elon Musk. So here we go. Here is the interview for you. We'll see you very, very shortly. And welcome to the show, an economist from Sense Partners. It's Shamubeel Eaqub. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited to have a chat with you, Shamubeel.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You've featured on our show many times, sir, for your various public commentaries. So it's nice to finally meet face to face and say, hello, kia ora, and thanks for coming and having a chat with us.
Pleasure.
Of course, it is a big day. It is a budget day. I guess the first thing I'd like to do is just kind of throw you the ball and say, what are your thoughts on the budget? Although when we're recording this, we've only had the information for a couple of hours, but I'm sure you've been over a good portion of it. What are your initial thoughts on the budget that was delivered today?
Yeah, look, a little bit of context first. So the budget is really about that additional spending that we're going to make in the next few years, right? So if you think about how much money we're going to spend next year as a government, the budget is about 5% of it, and the other 95% is pretty much business as usual.
Right.
So it is very much at the increment. There was some really good stuff in the budget, and the really good stuff was really around not the how much money did I get, but it was about $77 billion they've committed to capital investment. So, as you know, New Zealand has a huge infrastructure deficit. It's in the order of over $200 billion. We really need to keep maintaining our assets, bring them up to spec, and we've been neglecting them for a long time. So that was very welcome. The rest of it was pretty ho-hum. There was stuff that some people were like, there was things like extending the early childhood education stuff, the removal of the $5 copay on prescriptions, which by the way is a great thing because it's ridiculous to fund most of the prescriptions, but stopping poor people from getting the medicine for $5.
Yeah.
There was good stuff around public transport, making it free for under 13s and half price for under 25. So there was good things, but they were at the margin. These were not like huge things, and we wouldn't have expected them because this is a election year. This is the setup, and we expect to see most of that contest of ideas and I guess the bribes to buy the votes really coming up in the coming months.
I like it how you use the word setup because I think about stand-up comedy, telling a joke. There's a setup and there's a payoff. So if this is the setup, then the payoff is the policies that'll come out during the election cycle to say what we'll do if you re-elect us. That's what you're saying, yeah?
Absolutely. And for the incumbents, it's actually a very tricky game, right? Because you want to make sure there's enough room for you to do the things that you want to do, but make sure you lock up as much of the money as possible so then the opposition can't do anything without changing things you've already promised.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. We talked about this last night, or in the last couple of nights, actually. We were saying, if I'm not saying that Labor's going to lose and National's going to win or anything, but if you were going to go out, I'd rather go out in a screaming ball of fire and, meaning not scorched earth, but meaning something that I'd go to war for, something that's inspirational. And if they put things in place before they go, then National kind of has to follow them on if they've been committed in the budget for the following years, even if they lose. That's fair, eh? That's how it kind of works.
It's kind of how it works. I mean, I wouldn't say that it was scorched earth in any way because, the kinds of things that was announced in this budget, they were pretty, they're kind of sensible, right? I mean, things like, prescription co-pays, you kind of look at that and you kind of go, would you really begrudge that to anybody? Not really. I think where this government has kind of locked up the budget is much more on the capital investment. So that's going to increase from an average of about $10 billion a year to about $18 billion a year for the next 3 years. So it's a huge increase in building our bridges and our hospitals and schools and those kinds of things. It's really hard for any political party to say, we're not going to build and invest in our country.
Yeah. And it's an investment over the next few years that will then benefit the country for the next 100 years as well. So it's an investment up front for a long-term return.
Oh, absolutely. Look, I mean, we have so underinvested in our country, right? In our infrastructure. We're running down our roads, our bridges, our dams, our flood protections. These are things that have been cumulative over a number of decades. And we really need to get on top of it again. And I don't care which political party you come from. This has to be done because this is for future generations. It's not about us.
The government is calling it the bread and butter budget. The opposition seem to be calling it the big blowout. Is the truth more with one or the other of those, or do you find it somewhere in the middle?
Well, there wasn't a huge blowout in the sense that, yes, the borrowing is going to increase and the spending is increasing a bit, but it's nothing that would make you super concerned. Right. But I think from an opposition perspective, the real problem is there is no headroom to kind of do a lot of stuff without making big changes to essentially that investment program. And I think that would be very frustrating to them. Was it a bread and butter? Not really, because there wasn't a huge amount for middle New Zealand. And I think, again, that's really being the setup for the election coming up.
I was interested to watch David Seymour being interviewed by stuff.co.nz. And he basically said he didn't trust Treasury's figures. I don't know if you saw this conversation because, the government reported, inflation will come down, all these things. And David Seymour basically said, but Treasury's been wrong the whole time. From an economist point of view, how trustworthy is what Treasury projects?
Yeah, that's a good one, good question. And the answer is we don't get much right when it comes to forecasting. It doesn't matter whether it's the Treasury or the banks or the Reserve Bank. We have no idea about what's going to happen in the future. The purpose of the forecast in the budget is not to say this is what will happen. It's to say this is a base case scenario. And on the basis of that, given the decisions we make, how will things fall out? So, I mean, it's very easy for David to go and say, oh, I don't trust Treasury. But what's the alternative?
Yeah.
Is he more accurate?
Yeah. It's exactly what I thought, Shamubeel. I'm like, if I'm in government and I have to make decisions, what do I make those decisions based on? Do I make them based on what Treasury says or what David Seymour says? And I'd probably lean towards Treasury, but yeah, it's sort of what I was thinking as well. It's a crazy one. But I guess the opposition has to look for something to poke the bear with, don't they, if they're going to get their headlines as well.
And look, and legitimate criticism as well, because as forecasters, economists are not good. Like with anything, forecasting is incredibly uncertain. And we should never think of the future as some kind of known track, right? We should be thinking about it in terms of scenarios. And, last couple of years have really shown us that, right? With COVID, floods, cyclones, how could you predict any of this stuff?
Yeah. Look, I've got a couple of questions actually based around that, Shamubeel, because it's just like Joe Ordinary, right? The dumb dude at the bottom of the South Island. I hear one political side saying one thing and then the other political side saying the absolute opposite. And I'm trying to figure out who's right, or is the truth somewhere in the middle? How would you describe our economy right now? Not projecting, not looking forward, but how are we doing today? And how does that compare to the rest of the world?
Look, there is the aggregates, those numbers that you see talked about on TV or in the newspapers versus what you're feeling in your own family budget or in your own business.
Yeah.
And the reality is right now, people are hurting because your money doesn't go as far. The weekly shop is way more expensive. And for many businesses, they're really struggling because there's a lot of uncertainty. So I think the current situation is people are living with fear. And I think that would be a reasonable description. Are we doing much worse than other parts of the world? No. Everybody's in a similar kind of situation where there is this worry about the cost of living, the increases in interest rates, and the lack of certainty in the future. So we are probably in the same place if you look at the forecast from Treasury, caveating that it's not always accurate.
Yep.
They reckon it's going to be kind of okay, that things are pretty much at stall speed, and hopefully by the end of this year, we'll start to recover. Yep, I think that's probably how it's going to look from the aggregate. For the individuals, I think this year is going to be really tough, especially those people who are still to refinance their mortgages over the coming months.
Looking back to the budget from today, some of the criticisms that have come out from oppositional parties, well, even from within their own parties, because the Greens weren't that happy with a few things. As an economist, what do you look at the budget and do you think, yeah, that's a fair criticism? Anything come to mind?
Look, it's probably for me is the lack of coherence, right? We're going to build more schools, but when are we going to pay our teachers enough so that we have a workforce of teachers that are there to actually use those classrooms and deliver the education that our children want and need? So there is a lack of coherence. So quite often there is this kind of, we do these piecemeal things, all those little band-aids to try and deliver things. And I think that's exactly what's happening with budgets in successive years, in successive different political parties. That would be the big criticism, the lack of coherence and being well knit, because they only like announcing the things that gives them at least, that kind of figurative ribbon cutting.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Hey, last question as well. Well, last couple of questions based around the same thing. Because we've got you tonight, I'd like to figure out a bit more about where we're at and what is happening with the economy. I'm obviously, as I said, Joe Idiot. But the way I sometimes have understood the reason that the world is in the position where it is right now with things like inflation is because during COVID, we quote unquote printed money. But the reason we quote unquote printed money was to do things like, make sure our small businesses didn't go bankrupt and enable people to stay home. Is that a fair assertion as to one of the driving factors to where inflation is today? Yes, because governments have spent more, but they had to because if they didn't, we would have lost half of our small businesses with no support.
Yeah, look, it's been such a bizarre few years, right? In 2020, I'd say a lot of the inflation was because things were just shut. You couldn't move things around, you couldn't make things. So we created this almost this gummed up economy around the world. And then in 2021, 2022, I think we saw this big opening up with all the subsidies and things like that. And they were very different in different parts of the world. In New Zealand, it was largely about saving businesses. In places like the US, they actually sent checks to people to spend. So they were quite different things. So I think I prefer our approach in the sense that we didn't have that mass closure of businesses or unemployment, and that was really positive, right? So when we recovered, we didn't get the same kind of massive spend up and massive kind of increase that we had seen in other places. But what was different about us was we borrowed a shit ton of money to buy houses from each other, and house prices rocketed up. So that's where a lot of New Zealand's inflation was different from other places. So I'd say, it's not one kind of thing that was the same everywhere, but the inflation surge was global, and it has been very high. It's starting to come off. I'm really hopeful, not optimistic, but hopeful that it is going to come off over the next 12 months or so, mainly because interest rates around the world have just increased so much that so many people are going to be in a world of pain.
Second part of that question, if it is as I asked and as you've just said, because of those two things, we as citizens decided to spend too much for the houses over that period, and also the government helping keep small businesses open and also helping people stay home when they had COVID. If those were two of the major factors to driving inflation, what would our economy look like today, do you think, if we had have not done that? Like if we had have followed, like I remember Simon Bridges very early on when he was leader wanting to open up the borders, which wasn't a particularly good result for him. It was probably what led him to the downfall of his leadership. But if we had have taken the opposite approach, which is what we hear many in opposition saying today we now should have done with hindsight, what would we don't need to talk about what the death rate would be, for example, from COVID, but what would just the economy have looked like today, in your opinion, if we hadn't have supported those businesses and, I don't know, we hadn't have had the money to enable people to stay home when they were sick?
Yeah, I'd start by saying that I wouldn't have necessarily done things the way that we did with the benefit of hindsight. But given the situation we were in, which was extraordinarily uncertain, right? And the risks were just extraordinary. We were thinking that we might be facing depression-style economic shock.
Yeah.
That was very frightening. And that was the reason why governments around the world, including ours, just went so hard, not just around the health prescriptions, but also around the economic prescriptions. I think in terms of the efforts to save business failures and keep people home so then we could enforce the public health policy stuff, that was very good. I think the easing up on lending for houses was silly. No house was ever going to die as a result of COVID, right? We should have made it easier to borrow money for consumers, so consumer loans, because people who are poor could not access money through that COVID period. And we should have made it easier for businesses to borrow money, because those are the kinds of groups of people who would have hurt the most during that period. So I think that was probably the big mistake. And also on the things like wage subsidies, we probably could have made it a bit tighter and slightly less easy to get. But those are quibbles at the margin, rather than saying I would have done things differently. If we hadn't done those things, I think New Zealand would have suffered incredibly. I think we would have had massive amounts of unemployment. I think many of the business people who today are complaining about not wanting to pay more tax, they would have been dead. Those businesses would be dead today. They would not exist. Yeah. And that takes a huge toll, right? Starting a business is hard. Running a business is hard. All the learning by doing that you do, those things are very difficult to reclaim by just starting a new business. So I think that we've had a lot of benefits in sustaining an economy relatively undisrupted through that COVID period.
Hey, it's been really good to speak to you today. I've really enjoyed it. I guess one last thing, thinking about moving forward, do you think this government will introduce a wealth tax? That's something that's in the news at the moment in the lead up to the election. Do you think they should introduce a wealth tax?
I think we should absolutely have a wealth tax. Will this government introduce one, or this political party introduce one? I don't think so. I don't think so because our rich are very well organized. I think most New Zealanders have a mistaken belief that in the future they might be rich, and so rich that they don't want to be caught in that wealth tax net. So, I think we are pretty selfish, and I think we're too selfish to implement the kinds of policies that would actually build our nation going forward. So we need to have a crisis that's even bigger than we've experienced so far before we're going to tackle those big issues around tax and fairness in our country.
Hey, Shamubeel, it's been an absolute delight speaking to you tonight. I very much appreciate you giving us some time, and I hope we can connect again before the upcoming election. But thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Pat.
Alrighty then. Yes, and about 60 seconds into that conversation, and I'll come back, Chewy, and give us a chance to respond to that. But I nearly stopped it because it's significant breaking news. About 60 seconds into that conversation, my phone started going crazy because a man has been arrested and charged with arson in the Loafers Lodge fire. A man has been arrested and charged in relation to the fatal fire at Loafers Lodge in Wellington, Newtown on Monday night. The death toll from the blaze was 6, but it may be days before a final death toll was known. 2 bodies were recovered from the scene on Thursday. In a statement on Thursday night, police said a man had been arrested earlier in the afternoon and charged with 2 counts of arson. The investigation into the fire was ongoing, and police said they could not rule out further more serious charges in relation to the deaths at the scene. Acting Wellington District Commander Inspector Dion Bennett said, sorry, I was double reading something, said police were not seeking anyone else in relation to the fire. The arrested man is set to appear in Wellington District Court on the 19th of May. Breaking news, that's now out there. And Chewy, I guess to jump backwards, you want to have a chance to respond to Shamubeel? Anything in the chat you want to get up there?
Everybody was listening real hard because there wasn't a lot of talk in the chat during that. Look, the things that I wanted to highlight, obviously he touched on the fact that inflation was something that was a worldwide thing. It's not something that Labor has inflicted on us. But being a nation of importing and exporting, of course, we're massively exposed when manufacturing centers like China shut down, when our overseas markets shut down, transport routes shut down. We're enormously exposed. And then when everything starts to catch up, it doesn't catch up in a nice, smooth, easy to manage way. I mean, I've mentioned on the show before, someone that I know that deals in importation was mentioning, hey, look, pre-COVID, you could get a 40-foot shipping container from America to here for $5,000. And post-COVID, that same container, whether it was full or empty, was costing $15,000.
Yeah, for sure.
So, you know, those are the big changes. And that's all of our goods are affected by shipping. Other things I liked his comments around the edges of paying people to stay home and the wage subsidies. I can see the reasons why the government made the decisions that they made. It was just to get that money out there.
Yeah.
Because any sort of delay, especially in the initial stages, where businesses were unsure how they were going to cover their payrolls, it's at those times. Like, I mean, I spoke to someone in the job that I was working for at the moment who came in and just says, well, I'm going to grab this, which was a new TV, and then I'm going to go home and lay off all my workers.
Wow.
So that was his decision-making process. I hope he never followed through with that. But, I mean, business is brutal, right? Payroll's your biggest cost.
Yeah.
So if they didn't know that money was on the way, a lot of businesses would have just hit the shed workforce button.
Yeah, I also I think this is pretty obvious to many of us, what Shamubeel said, that I'm paraphrasing now, but many of those businesses that are today complaining about paying tax would not be here today if it wasn't for those wage subsidies provided to them that our tax is now paying for. So, you know, it's like what you're saying about that previous CEO. Was he involved in any of that? We don't know. I'm not going to actually even bother looking, but there are many people today who are making noises and complaints about how the economy is, whilst not acknowledging that they've had some benefits through this last 2 or 3 years. That's one of the contributing factors today to what the economy is. You know, you can't have a foot in both camps. Let me also say this about, I didn't know this from this afternoon, but it's been out. Maybe it's only been out since 7 o'clock, but I missed it. Here's something for you as well. Budget 2023, National vows to bring back $5 prescription fees if elected.
For fuck's sake.
The National Party says it will repeal the Labour's removal of a $5 charge on medicine prescriptions if elected. The scrapping of the $5 cost of prescriptions was one of the major spending initiatives in the government's 2023 budget, published on Thursday, expected to cost $706 million for the coming 4 years. But it's among the plans most opposed by the opposition. So helping vulnerable, sick people with a little bit of cash is one of the things that is most opposed by them. National Party Finance spokesperson Nicola Willis told Stuff National would return the $5 charge to prescriptions if elected, as it was, quote, nice to have. It was nice to have should not be a priority. Nice to have should not be the priority. In other words, this is a nice thing to have. That shouldn't be how you prioritize. But then she goes on to say, I've got a lot of sympathy for the fact there are lower income people for whom I don't want prescriptions to be a barrier. So because they are a barrier and the government's done something about it, National's saying we're going to go back to putting that barrier in place, whilst Nicola Willis is saying, I don't want there to be a barrier. Well, actually, there are already targeted ways of ensuring they don't face prescription fees, and you have the chemist warehouse offering all prescriptions for free. So in effect, the government ends up subsidising that, and also subsidising a lot of higher income people who are perfectly happy to pay the charge. National similarly did not support a move by the government to make public transport for children under 13 years old free, and to halve the price for children and young adults between 13 and 24 years of age. Now, I didn't get that prior to the show, but that popped up while I was looking around at the for the story on the arson charges, and I thought that we should just go and have a look at National saying we really care for lower income people and we don't want prescriptions to be a barrier. But you know how the Labour Party has just removed that barrier? We're going to put it back in place.
When I saw that headline, I thought, just isn't that typical? It doesn't matter what the policy was. They were always going to say, no, bad, repeal.
Yeah.
Because as we were saying the other night, they don't have ideas of their own. They don't have an alternative. They outside of a shitty tax cut,
yep.
Have they said how they are going to tackle inflation or make things better for their favourite phrase, everyday New Zealanders?
No. Well, they've told us they're going to go through the budget line by line once they get it before the
receipts.
election.
I forgot the receipts.
And give us receipts as well.
I don't even take my receipt from the supermarket. Why would I want a receipt?
Lots of chats going on at the moment. Is there anything else we want to get to before we head off to Mr. Musk?
Oh, we've got so many. Okay, missed this right at the start. Our patron number 49 is our new this week, Jeremy Miller. Thank you, buddy. What do we got? Free Soul said a really nice. This is almost a campaign phrase that someone should steal.
Sure.
The right ask, "What about me?"
What about me?
The left ask, "What about them?"
Well, I mean, we've seen that tonight, Chewy. Look, to be honest with you, with our construction company CEO saying there's nothing in it for me, whereas you acknowledge that, for example, the child thing is not for you, and you're like, great for them. So we've actually seen an example of that tonight happening in real time here in the show.
I have one criticism on the early childhood care.
Sure.
And it only applies to one family's foundation. But yeah, the Right Family Foundation own an awful lot of childcare and seem to be willing to give a lot of money to Sean Plunkett. So anything that helps that, I'm against. But
so we should cancel the whole thing.
Cancel everything.
Right.
Cancel childcare. Just put them in the factories like God intended. Gareth Wallace says, "This is like me as a 48-year-old man standing outside the Children's Hospital on Christmas Day yelling, 'Where's my bloody Christmas presents, you bastard?'"
Very good.
Paul says, "Even the language use, if you weren't specifically a beneficiary of this budget, then you're a loser, is designed to paint the government as playing favourites against you."
Yeah,
very much true. Arrest JK says, "Wait, is it Labour isn't giving anything away, or is it reckless spending? Which one? Can't be both."
Yeah, I actually heard Grant Robertson this afternoon talking about National, and I'm paraphrasing, but National saying there's nothing in this budget for anyone. What a waste of time. And they're also saying this is going to cause destruction to the economy for the next 10 years. It's like you can't kind of have both. This can't be a budget that's going to cause, my silly paraphrase, but death and destruction for 10 years and send us bankrupt, as Seymour actually did say, and there be nothing in it. You can't have both. Because if there's nothing in it, then there's no chance of it bankrupting us. And if there's too much in it and we're spending too much money, then there is. It's one or the other. So, yeah, it's been picked up a few times today, the kind of hypocrisy of two different positions.
I mean, that hypocrisy generally plays well with average, everyday construction CEOs. It's better to be addicted to spending than having a zero budget for 9 years.
Yeah.
Yep. And Jeremy here says funding prescriptions will lower hospitalizations because the lower socioeconomic parts of the country will be able to take the medications they need.
Yep.
And dare I say it, find it easier to have their kids in daycare.
Yeah. And also, I mean, the thing about that, you mentioned daycare, but, kids missing school, prescriptions, medicines, help that, help them keep in school, help the parents not have to stay home and look after their kids they get over it after 2 or 3 days because they've had their medicine rather than a whole week. There's lots of reasons. Lots of reasons.
Yeah, it strikes me, the more I think about it, there's a lot of long-term thinking about, okay, we've got X amount of dollars. What can we fire this at that's going to have the biggest bang for buck?
Yep.
And it's not necessarily like the first pass thinking. It's like, if you have kids able to get to school easier, as Grant Robinson was saying, it's a twofold, right? You put them on public transport, you're not congesting up the roads, parents are not worried about dropping their kids off, they're healthier, you've got more people going into apprenticeships and stuff like that. This is real long-term thinking. And to be able to pull that off in a time of crisis, you've got to applaud it.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the alternatives is you can have a $75 tax cut, go away. And Bradley here finishes out with repealing the
$5,
the free prescriptions is a strange hill to die on. And I think, like we started with good political slogans, that is Nationals one. This is a strange hill for us to die on.
All right,
weird.
We're moving on. The last story of tonight, we're talking about Elon Musk. This has been bouncing around the internet today. He went on CNBC, which is a business network, right? They talk business. It's like Fox News business. It's like a business network, and they talk business. And Elon Musk has not been very forthcoming going and sitting in front of a journalist who might delve a bit deeper and challenge him and push him. But he has, gone on a few things like the Rogan podcast or on, business networks to talk business. Now, it was a softball interview, but even though it was a softball interview, asking just 2 or 3 questions about why are you doing this? Basically, I'm a business journalist and I'm asking you from your business perspective, why are you doing these things? Even that question caused mayhem in Elon's brain and the responses. So let's have a look at a few of these things. The first one we're going to have a look at is, they're from 3 different networks. So I've just found some clips across the internet for us to have a look at. The first one is, I think it's an Israeli TV actually. And they were talking about some of the comments he was making about a white supremacist shooter, Nazi shooter. And it's really weird. Maybe it's not weird. The reality is Elon Musk is acting now and speaking now like a conspiracy theorist around COVID speaks. They hear something and they take it as gospel, right? So he says something here where there's no evidence for this person being a Nazi, yet there is. We'll let the story explain it in its entirety.
Following a tweet by billionaire Elon Musk against Holocaust survivor George Soros, the words "the Jews" jumped to the list of trending topics on Twitter.
So let's make this clear to start off with. Elon Musk made a tweet about George Soros where he called him Magneto, like an evil Jewish overlord. And after he made his tweet, the term "the Jews" started trending on Twitter. So whether Elon is a useful idiot or just an idiot or calculated in his thoughts, what he's doing is causing massive amounts of anti-Semitism. That's unquestionable by his tweet leading to the words "the Jews" trending.
And the Israeli Foreign Ministry was fast to respond to Musk's anti-Semitic tweets.
I mean, this is freedom of speech. I'm allowed to say what I want.
You absolutely are, but I'm trying to understand why you do, because you have to know it puts you in the middle of the partisan divide in the country. It makes you a lightning rod for criticism. I mean, do you like that? People today saying he's an anti-Semite. I don't think you are.
No, I'm definitely. I'm like a pro-Semite, if anything.
The phrase "the Jews" entered the list of trending topics on Twitter following a tweet by the owner and CEO of the social network, Elon Musk. Shortly after it was announced that the hedge fund by George Soros, the 92-year-old billionaire, had sold all of its holdings in Tesla, which Musk heads, the company's CEO tweeted that the Hungarian-American Holocaust survivor hates humanity. This without providing any explanation, adding that he reminds him of Magneto, the villain from the X-Men movies.
So, in case the accent causes someone, especially in the audio podcast, to not quite get all that, Elon Musk tweeted out that Soros hates humanity. He then tweeted out that he reminds him of Magneto. Now, on some levels, you might go, oh, it's a cartoon villain, da-da-da-da-da. But when you're talking about the world of Jewishness, of being Jews, and I had to learn this myself fairly recently when I asked a Jewish friend of ours, why is it anti-Semitic to say it about this group of people but not about this group of people? And I was educated to go, it's not that the Jews get blamed for stuff, it's that they get blamed for everything. Like if you go down every rabbit hole of who's to blame for something, you always end up in the area of white supremacy and Nazism at a Jewish person or the Jewish community. So when someone says, George Soros hates humanity, and then they basically say you're a supervillain, that just sparks off every person who is an anti-Semite, whether Elon Musk is or isn't, but to then reiterate their own beliefs around what the Jews, hence trending on Twitter, actually are. So this is what he said, and what he was doing is saying, "This is my free speech. I can do this." To which the host was saying, "Yeah, of course you can, but why are you doing it?" And that was enough to get him to turn into this lunatic. I'll just play this. I only got about 10 seconds. Let me play the last 10 seconds in case there's anything important, and then I'll throw it to you, Joey.
Following the tweet, which quickly gained hundreds of thousands of likes, the phrase "the Jews" jumped, as mentioned, to the list of trending topics on the platform.
There you go. There's two other clips, Chewy, but on that one, yours, sir.
It's just so tiresome. As someone that has followed people in that Jew-hating Nazi sphere of the internet for so long, and it to be always, it's a fringe group and that sort of thing. To have someone like Elon Musk and recently Kanye West and all of that sort of stuff just dragging up this old debunked bigotry is just, we shouldn't be at this part of history again,
Yeah. Well, let's have a look, because there's another part of this whole thing. Remember, this is on a new a business network, and on this, and this is not this one, this is MSNBC reporting on the CNBC one. This is talking about Elon Musk. And this is the bit where he sounds like a conspiracy theorist, anti-vaxxer. I don't mean about around vaccines, but that kind of that cognition that's not put together logically. He starts talking about how the shooter recently, there's no evidence that he was a Nazi, and he's heard it somewhere, and he's now spouting it as truth as one of the most followed people on Twitter. Let's just have a look to what was actually said.
When you link to somebody who's talking about the guy who killed children in a mall in Allen, Texas, and you say something like it might be a bad psyop. I'm not quite sure what you meant, but...
In that particular case, there was somehow that's not that that obviously people were killed, but it was, I think, incorrectly ascribed to be a white supremacist action.
Oh my God!
So did we hear that? Elon Musk just said this is the shooter was incorrectly described as a white supremacist. That's important just for the context for the rest of this conversation.
Evidence for that was some obscure Russian website that no one's ever heard of, that had no followers,
And now we're citing the evidence for this person being a white supremacist was on an obscure Russian website. In other words, this is what anti-vaxxers do. This doctor in Afghanistan said this, so therefore it's true.
The company that found this is Bellingcat.
Right.
Do you know what Bellingcat does? Psyops. I'm saying that I thought the ascribing it to white supremacy was.
This is the Reuters headline. Gunman who killed 8 at Texas shopping mall had neo-Nazi ideation. He was covered in Nazi swastikas.
Yes, he was, Joy. Can we stop this? Can we stop giving this guy softball interviews, please? My colleague Brandy Zadrazi did a TikTok video showing you exactly how you were able to find this guy's stuff. It was not complicated. And then if you want to ask the cops can tell you this guy had a Nazi tattoo. He had a swastika on his chest and an SS tattoo on his arm. We all saw this. So at some point, it's like an abdication of your journalistic duty to just like joke around with this guy who's spreading white supremacist talking points on national television.
So there you go. So it wasn't an obscure, and this is the thing, an obscure Russian website. He was tattooed in Nazi propaganda. Apart from anything else, apart from what, Freestyle said, it was all over his profile. There's other evidence, but the man who's running Twitter, who owns Twitter, who's probably boosting his own tweets to get more response than anybody else, is putting out false and fake information. And remember, when he bought it, he was promising, laugh or not, that it was going to be the most truthful, platform on the internet. And he's one of the biggest disseminators of bullshit and false information, Joey.
I gotta be honest, man. I'm finding it real hard to stay on Twitter. It's just so stupid. While that video was playing, I used every shred of my journalistic skills to see if I could find out what was going on with this guy, right? There we go. Went to Snopes.
One Google.
One solitary Google. Is this a photo of the Allen, Texas mall shooter? True. So, yes. For someone that is supposedly a genius, he is following the same edgelord to white supremacist pipeline that so many knuckle-dragging, window-licking, helmet-wearing retards do. Like, it's just infuriating. Like, there's been so many people fighting this for so many years. And he just farts out a thought, asking questions.
No, I don't think it is just asking questions. It really does feel like he's trying to be the cool kid. We all know
he's
that kid.
An edgelord.
All those people in school, you remember your friends, the one that always tries to one up everybody else and wants to be liked. That's honestly what it feels like to me. And we'll wrap up with this last part of the conversation because, this probably won't go so well for Elon Musk because this will be 2023's biggest meme on Twitter. Again, the journalist, pretty softball interview. I don't think you're an anti-Semite. It's pretty lightweight. Asks
I think he was stunned what he walked into.
A single question, and this is the response that Elon Musk gives about free speech and money. What about if what you say impacts your business financially?
Do your tweets hurt the company? Are there Tesla owners who say, I don't agree with his political position and I know it because he shares so much of it? Or are there advertisers on Twitter that Linda Yaccarino will come and say, you got to stop, man. Or, I can't get these ads because of some of the things you tweet.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Jesus. I'm reminded of the scene in The Princess Bride. Great movie.
Great movie.
Where he confronts the person who killed his father. And he says, offer me money. Offer me power. I don't care.
It's actually not what he says in the movie, by the way.
Of course
so you
not.
Just don't care. You want to share what you have to say.
I'll say what I want to say, and if the consequence of that is losing money, so be it.
Now, the problem with that, I'll share what I want to say, and if the consequences of that is if I lose money, who cares? He has a public company in Tesla. He has a fiduciary responsibility to make his investors money. So what he actually just said, I'm not saying what he said was criminal, but if that's actually how the business was run, that's criminal. You're not allowed to have a public company without actively trying to make money. So if what you're saying is losing money, you're actually legally not allowed to, quote, not care. So Twitter's different. He owns Twitter. It's his little baby. He can do what he wants with it. He can run it to the ground. He can, whatever. But Tesla is different. Now, also the quote that he quoted was wrong. He doesn't say, I don't care. He says something like, I want my father back, you son of a bitch. So actually, if you follow that through to what the logical conclusion would be, it's not, I don't care. It's almost like, give me what I've lost. And that's not actually what he's saying. Now, side point, but the quote's not right. But the point being, he thinks that he's allowed to just lose his investors' money. If I don't make my investors' money, I don't care. That's actually what he's saying. And that's not legal when you have a public company, Chewie.
I wonder what his Saudi investors think about that. Yeah, I mean, the guy professes to be a big movie fan. Love The Princess Bride. Great movie, great movie. He also professes to be a huge fan of the X-Men movies and seems to have consistently missed the subtext in that one. It's not even really subtext. It's just storyline when he's talking about Magneto. What an idiot. But since we're referencing movies, right?
Yep.
His little response there brought one response to mind.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
On your soul. Great movie. Yeah. So look, I mean, a fascinating day, and I suspect you'll never see Elon Musk interviewed by a journalist again, unless it's a Hannity type figure or a Newsmax type figure that'll just stick their nose firmly up his asshole and enjoy sniffing in the brown stuff. That'll be it. But those were just questions from a journalist who works in a business thing going, but when you tweet, what if that impacts your business? It's actually a perfectly fair and fairly soft comment. And he couldn't do it. 12-second glitch. 12 seconds he sat there before he misquoted Princess of the Bride as some kind of story to say, I don't care, not understanding that he has to care because he's got a public a business that's public.
Do you think he had a PR person just out of camera frame there just having an aneurysm?
I wouldn't think so. No
Good
PR people
Lord.
around him. Now, I want to put up one other thing because I saw that you highlighted it from JK. Just a coincidence this happens the day after Soros sells his Tesla shares. Yeah, there are several commentators I've seen online who are drawing a direct line to basically Soros sells his Tesla shares and then Musk bullies him on Twitter because he sold his Tesla shares.
Because he's that much of a fragile man, baby.
Yeah, I use the word bullies there, but but goes after him because he sold his Tesla shares, decided to tell him he was no good for humanity or whatever the direct quote is.
Can you imagine what that must be like, right? To have this dude with the following that he has, with the social media tool that he owns, and the weaponized group of weird crypto dudes that worship him. And then he points them at somebody, like a literal individual, and goes, this is the bad guy. That's so concerning.
There's something else that I saw today, and I think it might have been on the Rational National or something. Pops up on my YouTube feed, the Rational National, something like that. And they pointed out that, remember this guy, George Soros, right? The guy who's supposed to be all evil incarnate and controls everything. Yeah? He's a billionaire. But they found out where he was on the rich list. He's like 380-ish. He's in the high 300s. And for some reason, because he's Jewish, because it's anti-Semitism, the right have managed to paint him as the overlord of everything that ever happens. Musk is exponentially wealthier than him. Bezos is exponentially more wealthy than him. This guy who's a billionaire, the Koch brothers, exactly. Who's a billionaire? Like, we can have our conversations around what billionaires there are and there should be.
Rupert Murdoch.
When it comes to wealth in that world, he isn't even in the top 250. So I don't know. He's either the New Zealand of the billionaires constantly punching above his weight, or it's just another example of anti-Semitism and a trope that they've been able to throw at this one person. Because he's done to the left what the Koch brothers do to the right by funding a few things. That's it.
Yeah. You know, this is a guy that could just keep making cars, shut the fuck up, and enjoy his money, send a rocket into space every now and then. But he can't even hold his shit together enough not to just constantly shitpost his way into white supremacy.
Yeah. I wonder if you said something. I remember listening to Ricky Gervais doing a podcast after, because he did this thing like a Fight for Life where he did a celebrity boxing match. And they basically, Stephen Merchant was talking to him, and he basically said he'd give up every single, this is the joke that Stephen Merchant was making, that Ricky Gervais would give up every single award he's ever won if he walked into a pub and like young larrikins were scared of him because of his boxing prowess. And Ricky was like, yep, I'd do it. I wonder if you said to Elon Musk, how much money would you give up? How much of your wealth would you give up to be universally considered the coolest person on the planet? I bet you it's a fucking lot. I bet you that would be really, 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 really something he'd want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I can believe it.
Because that's what he seems to be trying to pitch for. And saying all of that,
the myth of Elon is what's got him there. Like, I've got people going, "Oh, he's a genius engineer." No, he's not. He made some half-assed code. He lied about being a genius. He got some money and he bought some products. He bought engineers. He bought designers. He bought existing products. He bought companies. He's a marketer, not an engineer. He might have done some engineering, but that's not where. No.
And saying all of that, I'm assuming that Chewy and I will be off Twitter tomorrow, not by our own choosing. Anyway, of course not. I'm just joking. All right, guys, I think we're done. If you're up in Auckland, I'll see you this weekend because, you know, actually, we're both up in Auckland this weekend, Chewy. We're going on a date.
We are.
There. Yeah, so
we are.
Auckland, look the fuck out. We's coming for you. And
does this mean that there's no Monday show, by the way? Have we mentioned that?
I actually don't. I'm back on Monday afternoon. I know you're not.
Oh, okay.
So I think there probably still will be a show on Monday afternoon, but follow us on Twitter, peeps, just in case, you know, a plane gets delayed or something happens and we don't end up getting back in time. But then again, I'm off next Thursday because one of my kids is in a show, and that's one of the nights she's performing, so I got to go see it. So I got to go. I got to go to her show on Thursday night. So maybe I do Monday night by myself, and you can finally do Thursday night by yourself, Chewy. Or is that?
Well, that sounds like a plan.
Does that make you quiver?
With excitement.
Rocky Horror Picture Show. Anticipation. All right, guys. Have a great weekend. Be safe, everybody. We will catch you Monday night, I'm assuming from 9 p.m. Don't forget to like and subscribe for 20% more sloths. See you all Monday. That sloth video that you showed us got us demonetized, by the way, just so you know.
No,
yeah,
we're not monetized.
Yeah. I know we get about 73 cents per video, mate. It's fantastic. Like in a year, we probably almost get to double digits.
George
in dollars.
Soros money.
Yeah, that big. Oh, actually, we should go because Grant Robinson's due at my place any minute. So, all right, guys. Hey, thanks for being with us this week. Remember, hashtag share our shit. I'll put some of these clips up tomorrow. And I will catch you Monday night, I'm assuming at 9 o'clock. And me and Chewy will probably catch you either Tuesday or Wednesday. We'll see you through the week next week. Be safe, be well, and we look forward to seeing all of you back here Monday night from 9 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News. Hooroo.
See ya.